Hi there and welcome. My name's Mark Herbst, Associate Superintendent for Modesto City Schools, and you are attending my first shot at a screencast. And this will work toward your zero point 0.5, or if anybody just wants to tune in to listen or at least log on this or however you do it to hear what I've got to say about PBIS, kind of give an overview of it, something that's near and dear to my heart, and kind of clear up some of the misnomers that are out there. This training is for administrators, teachers, classified staff, and the like, and I'll kind of get into it. But just a little bit in terms of why I'm doing this, and then I kind of want to talk about our journey. But um, I'm doing this because I do believe during this pandemic that there's a large number of people, teachers, admin, and support staff who actually want to learn more about things that they probably didn't get to either attend a training on or maybe didn't quite understand. And so I kind of felt obligated to put something like this out. I do think that there's a number of inaccuracies and misconceptions about positive behavior intervention and supports, both in our district and just around. And I kind of want to serve to clarify some of those. You'll notice that the way I've done this training is I've got it to where I kind of talk a little bit about what PBIS is. I'm going to explain the tiers and what it may look like, and then I between every slide I kind of try to clear up a misconception. I also hope for greater understanding that's going to lead to greater buy-in. PBIS has been something that I've been working on and or providing training on or support to for probably the better half of the last 7 to 8 years. And over that time, our district has made a huge change in the way that we approach discipline in general. And I'm sure that that's controversial. I know it's controversial. I know that teachers have felt that PBIS may be too soft, and honestly, I think that's because of misunderstanding. I think administrators have felt their hands might have been tied because of something that they would blame on PBIS. The fact of the matter is well, I'll get into what PBIS is, but it's important to remember that I think our society has taken a huge shift in terms of how it looks at suspension. And I think along that way, PBIS has kind of gotten a bad name, even though it really shouldn't. And I'll kind of clear up that in some of our misconceptions. I alluded to this in the beginning. Anybody who has not earned time toward their zero point 0.5 will earn or can earn by watching this and then completing some practicum, which I'll talk about here in a second. I do not plan in any way, shape, or form to talk to you guys for 2 hours. I think that it would probably be the closest thing to torture as one could hope for. But what I do want to do is kind of go through the basics. I'm estimating probably about 30 minutes of me talking through this. And then what I will do is I've attached an article that I'll want you to read and respond to. Nothing too no bit. I'm not going to be great. Well, I'll be reading it, but I'm not going to grade it. You complete it, and you're going to get credit. Then the remaining part of your 2 hours, I'll give you access, or I'll want you guys to log into pbis.net, I believe, or org. I think it's pbis.org. A lot of resources there that are beneficial for administrators, teachers, and the like. So anyway, so you'll listen to the screencast, the practicum you're going to send back to me, and I've included my email address, and then I will give you credit for those people that are going for the 2 hours. So first off, let's just talk about what PBIS is. And I guess I can kind of work toward clearing up a misconception right off the get-go that I didn't put in there. When people talk about positive behavior intervention and support, it is not a canned curriculum by any stretch of the imagination. There are no PBIS books, so to speak. It doesn't direct you on what to do and how to teach something, etc., although I can give you some good ideas. But PBIS is really a behavioral framework that's based on the response to intervention model. So administrators and teachers, you're probably familiar with that model. Classified staff, maybe not. But basically, and I didn't include it in here, it's almost like putting a group of kids up in a pyramid, so to speak. And I don't mean up, but along the continuum of a pyramid. Any kid in an RTI model gets access to Tier 1, and we'll talk about that. And Tier 1 is the base program. And RTI can exist for behavior, it can exist for academics, there's social emotional RTI, there's attendance RTI, all sorts of... But the basic framework is, hey, a kid's going to get what they need as a base. If they're entitled or need intervention, a kid's going to get an intervention. And the intervention is going to be designed to to hopefully work and to where the student no longer needs any assistance. That works well in academics and can work well in with behavior. So looking at this, if we do PBIS Tier 1 right, and I'll explain what Tier 1 is, about 80% of the students on a school site should respond to that. And don't get me wrong, and by respond, that means not engage in serious serious forms of misconduct. They're going to respond. There's going to be a positive culture. They're not going to get in trouble for the most part. That doesn't mean that there may not be bumps in the road. That doesn't mean that they're going to be angels in class. But generally speaking, they're going to fall in line and be able to navigate the school, their school with very, very little discipline or any need for discipline, so to speak. Tier 2 are for those students who do not respond to Tier 1, and it's a slew of interventions. And again, it's not a cookbook of interventions, but there's interventions that are provided to those kids, typically in a group format. I'll go into that a little bit later. Tier 3 is for the toughest of the tough. Tier 3 are the kids that do not, or for the children who do not respond to Tier 1, Tier 2, and need some more intensive individualized intervention. So if you're doing things right, again, about 80% of your kids are going to do well on Tier 1 if you're doing Tier 1 strongly. If you've got a good start in Tier 2, that's going to be about 15% of your school population, and Tier 3 about 5%. Those percentages vary. You may see some that kind of mix the numbers, but for me, that's a pretty good estimate in terms of when you do things right, how things should fall. There's a couple basic premises to PBIS, and the first one is when it comes to behavior like academics needs to be explicitly taught. And I would say in our society now, more than any time that I can remember, I do believe that our kids sometimes come to schools without prerequisite skills and the knowledge about or especially what we're looking for in a classroom, on a recess yard, or wherever it may be, but also they come with deficient skills in how to navigate social situations, cooperative learning, etc. So the premise, regardless of the level, is behavior needs to be explicitly taught. The other basic premise is that the overwhelming majority of behavior can change. We can shape it, and it can change through intervention. Well, with that, I'm going to hit my first PBIS misnomer or misconception. And one of those big misconceptions out there is I thought PBIS requires us to speak by only using positives to reinforce and correct behavior. This is absolutely not true. Positive behavior intervention and support doesn't require you to say something. I mean, the rules should be listed in a positive format, but I mean, we address misbehavior when we see it. It doesn't require me to speak only in positives to kids and only use positive reinforcement as the sole way of shaping behavior. It doesn't actually, there's no piece of PBIS like that at all. As a matter of fact, PBIS does recognize that positive reinforcement along with consequences is effective in changing behavior. This falls in line with everything that Robert Marzano says too. So again, it by no way, shape, or form eliminates the idea that a student may receive consequences for their behavior. And that's a big misconception out there that a kid should not receive consequences. On the flip end of it, though, there's also heavy research base that says, yeah, if you use positive reinforcement, you can shape behavior, and I believe that wholeheartedly. Tier 1, and I'll probably spend the most time on this tier simply because it's the most important, guys. When you have 80% of a school population that hopefully can, with their needs met through Tier 1, it needs to be strong. And for those teachers out there, administrators, you think about it the same thing from an academic standpoint. If you're delivering good, solid instruction, the majority of your kids will not need intervention. And you could argue, hey, certain sides of town, pockets, etc. But I'm telling you truthfully, guys, when it comes to behavior, if we follow along these things, you're going to get a high percentage of kids that are just going to do it because of the culture that's created at the school. So Tier 1 for everyone. This is what every kid gets. Clear rules that are shared and explicitly stated to students. So these rules are plastered up and down the school. Everybody knows what the rules and expectations are. If there's rules in the cafeteria, kids know about them. Rules on the recess yard, kids know about them. Rules on the bus, kids know about them. Rules when you walk in the hallway, kids know about them. Everybody knows about them. Rules and expectations are taught to students ongoing. So, there's some clever things out there. I know some of our high schools have done some PBIS videos that I think are very cool, which are very effective. I've seen recess rodeos at the elementary school to where the yard duties and the administrators go out and they share and model what it looks like to behave, playing tetherball or turn taking, rule taking, etc. But guys, a teacher has a great role in this too. When you're using PBIS and you're teaching a behavior, you basically provide an example of a non-example of what that looks like. So let's say for example, you want to talk about what it looks like and what your school's rules are: being safe, be respectful, be responsible. A teacher can engage in demonstrating what's safe to a student just simply by stating what an example of being safe is and what a non-example of being safe is. It's that simple. And so a lot of teachers and probably a lot of classified will say, well, geez, I do that all the time. But what you're doing with PBIS is you do it under you basically reinforce the rules and expectations that are out there. So you're teaching a behavior, although it wouldn't be limited to that only, should to the greatest extent possible go back to those rules and expectations. Also, good behavior, like kids following rules, are reinforced and reinforced often. PBIS does take a big slant on making sure that there is a well-known reinforcement system, whether it be daily drawings, weekly drawings, kids working to earn something, etc. It's basically recognizing and acknowledging when kids behave and behave well. There's a general agreement between the school community of what problems teachers are responsible for and what problems the office handles. And that's sometimes a tough lift for our school sites, but I'll tell you, there's many that have been successful. That's basically just the idea of, hey, we're on board with when this happens. Let's say it's gum chewing in a classroom. I'm not going to be sending a referral up to the office for them to handle that. The office is going to get involved when I have utilized this, and it's not gotten anywhere. Or a student becomes physical, they're going to go to the office. It's basically, though, a general understanding and agreement of what the roles are amongst administrators, teachers, and in some cases classified staff. PBIS teams assembled and review data on an ongoing basis. The whole purpose, and this is oftentimes missed in our PBIS implementation in Modesto City Schools, is the creation of an action plan, and really kind of the role of what a PBIS team does. But what PBIS teams do is they get together with administrators and they talk about what their discipline data is looking like at the school site. They look at location of where incidents are occurring, frequency, what is the actual incident, and they develop plans, and these plans become action plans. So they are not meant to replace the school-wide system of, hey, we're reinforcing when kids are safe, respectful, responsible. But let's say, for example, there was an issue with littering at lunch. There would then, the PBIS team would have used data to make that determination. They would have met as a team. They would have talked about the litter at lunch. They would have engaged in, okay, what do we need to do to tell our kids what the expectations are? How are we going to reinforce it? How are we going to track data to see if in fact whatever we've done is effective? And usually, guys, when we target resources, support, and reinforcement at something, the problem doesn't always completely go away, but it definitely diminishes. And that's kind of where what I put in there as the last bullet. Site responds by creating an action plan and charting progress toward improvement. Those action plans and those what is shared by the entire school community. Meaning, if we go back to that litter at lunch, everybody should be supporting and aware of that. That's the one of the PBIS focuses for a year. That makes it easier to where people are going to provide reinforcement. Next misconception, that PBIS is soft on discipline. I think this is funny. It's PBIS. We don't do PBIS PBIS is, when done right, can reduce suspension, but PBIS doesn't forbid somebody from being suspended. So there is no like PBIS, hey, you have to do this. There is an encouragement that we do try to intervene, and that obviously suspension is a method of last resort, which honestly, take society now, or it really should have been that all along. I mean, we shouldn't be suspending kids when we could do intervention that is going to curb their behavior. But yeah, PBIS doesn't address suspension. They don't say, thou shall not suspend, anything like that. Restorative practices, which maybe could be another screencast, also doesn't do that. So big misnomer on there. PBIS doesn't, there is no discipline code with PBIS. So what happens when somebody doesn't respond to the program that I shared with Tier 1, which is, hey, teachers on board, classified on board, everybody on board with what the school-wide rules and expectations are. Kids know them. Teachers are talking about them. When there's misbehavior in a classroom, hey, that's an example of not being safe in my classroom. Here at such and such Wilson Elementary, Enoch's High School, we're safe in the classroom. My expectation is that you behave in a safe manner in my classroom. All that basically creates a nice tier, a nice structure and a nice culture for kids. Along the flip end of it, there's the reinforcement angle. So when all that's going well on tier 1, again, you're going to get about 80% of your kids. Tier 2 is going to be what happens when we don't get kids who respond to that. We're attempting to provide them with reinforcement. They're not there. They haven't bought in. They're continuing to misbehave. They're continuing to get suspended. Tier 2 is basically for those kids that need something more, and the intervention is typically done in a group setting. So instead of, and it's usually a smaller group setting. So whereas Tier 1 is for the whole, Tier 2 is now for the individual who needs additional assistance. And the nice thing about PBIS, and you may see some of the stuff on the website, is there is no cookie cutter in terms of what that intervention can look like. There's ideas, but really a site can develop the interventions that they need to support. And the district has actually provided quite a bit of intervention by the way of the Student Assistance Specialist program. Student Assistance Specialist program were put in essence to handle some Tier 2 and actually Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavior. But please make no mistake about it, guys. Other individuals can provide a Tier 2 support. It wouldn't be your teachers in a classroom, but it could be somebody who's paid to do some work after hours or before school hours. So some examples include check in, check out, which is an effective way of curbing behavior. I have 5 kids that come in and see me in the morning. We discuss what it is that they're going to work for toward the day. We may kind of talk about some problematic times, like let's say we were having an assembly or something that typically kind of might get a kid off their game, so to speak, for the day, or at least what we may anticipate. We'd talk through that. Then at the end of the day, the kid would come back and check in with me, and we'd see how their day is. Benefit of that, number one, you got somebody in there, you get kids who commit to okay, no, I'm going to do this, this, and this. There's follow-up on the other side, and typically check-in, check-out is done in a situation where those people have good relationships with those individuals. We could ask kids to come in, and I hate to use the term old detention, but it's like that, additional time to where kids have to learn school rules, whatever they may be. So I keep a kid 15 minutes after school. We're talking about what it looks like to be safe in my class, or maybe I'm having a number of kids that stay in there. Again, guys, not a direct punishment. I don't call it detention. I call it extra time learning school rules, and it's done in a group format. Social skill groups is another common example. Hey, social skill groups on how to navigate tough situations, how to approach an adult properly when you want something. That's examples of socials, or some of the social skills that are taught. Misconception number 3, PBIS is an elementary initiative. It doesn't work in high school. I would definitely, I would actually say in some ways the creativity. I see creativity coming more out of the high school just by nature of some of the videos they create. But guys, PBIS is a framework that's based on the principles of RTI. There is no grade span. It's basically under the premise you teach kids behavior, you reinforce them, you're going to get a large number of kids who are going to fall in line. U.S. Department of Ed is a firm supporter of PBIS. There's great work done in Fresno on PBIS at the high schools, Oakland, etc. So no, it's not an elementary initiative. We could have great PBIS programs at the junior high and high school level, and in some cases in this district we do. All right, Tier 3 is interventions for the very few. So in this, we're looking at about 5% of our population, and these are the kids that are still misbehaving despite having access to Tier 1, Tier 2, and now Tier 3 support. So we've pulled them in groups. We're doing check-in, check-out. We're doing those things. These kids basically then go to a more individualized intervention. And that intervention, again, not spelled out, but it could be a number of different things. It could be check-in, check-out, but more often, more frequent during the day. It could be individualized. It could be behavioral contracting, the whole idea that if you do these things, you're going to get this, and it's specific to that kid. Behavioral plans that are drawn up by administrators, teachers, sometimes school psychologists, behavioral coaches, things like that. Student success team meetings. Notice again, we're focusing on the individual. and referrals for outside services. And those services can be, and I said outside here on the PowerPoint, but it really can actually even be some of the clinicians that we've got within Modesto City Schools, referrals for additional clinical time outside or outside the school setting. So those are the type of tier 3 interventions that PBIS supports. Misconception number 4, PBIS will stop all behavior. You know, I get this a lot. I doubt that the people that I don't know for sure if they'll listen to this, but you know, I'll get emails. Well, you know, Mark, we're doing PBIS. We have our rules up. The kids are still misbehaving. We still have these kids. And you know what's funny, guys? It doesn't matter. We're always going to have them. We're always going to have the kids. We're always going to have kids that struggle to behave at school. Unfortunately, it's just a fact of the matter. It's true. What PBIS does is it tries to reduce the number of kids. Meaning, if I don't have a good solid PBIS plan in place, if I'm not good at PBIS at tier 1, I've got too many kids in tier 2. And tier 2 kids are the ones that are likely causing a majority of problems in your class. Tier 3 would even be more exaggerated than tier 2. PBIS in and of itself is not going to stop all behavior. It's not the silver bullet that fixes everything. But guys, mark my words, when it's implemented right, you're going to see a reduction in behaviors and you're going to see an improvement in school culture. Even then, guys, we may not be able to curb all behavior, but that is inexcusable for us in public education not to at least try. And so PBIS forces the issue of setting up interventions for your tier 2 and tier 3 kids, because not having those interventions or not allowing a kid to that intervention isn't fair to the child. So that's misconception number 4. All right, so I'm going to kind of get to the, let's see how much time I'm at. I'm at about 21 minutes. Yeah, it'll probably finish right around 30. Perfect. All right. So I kind of figured, I've kind of danced around PBIS. I've given you an overview. Many of you guys already know it, but I kind of want to get into what I would say is the call to arms, so to speak. Really what I'm asking you guys to do as a result of this, whether it be administrative, whether it be teacher, whether it be classified. Be consistent with the rules. Teach, reinforce, and remind consistently. And I'm going to speak to teachers on this one especially. To me, and I do this during the classroom management training, so if you guys are listening to me now and you've heard me, I'd say the exact same thing. It makes so little sense for teachers to have numerous classroom rules in their class that differ from the school-wide rules. And I'll give you an example. Kids behave when they know what expectations are. Where we go wrong is that what Mr. Herbst demands is different than what Dr. Noguchi demands. And so when I go from class to class or year to year, the expectation changes. Therefore, the kid has the ability they take advantage of it. It's human nature. I mean, heck, I certainly took advantage of stuff like that when I was a child. If we're consistent with our rules and if we're consistent with our reinforcement, children's behavior will improve. Trust me on that. It's unfortunate because what we have in some of our school sites is a lack of buy-in or inconsistency, or this is allowed here and not allowed here. And so therefore kids either take advantage of it or they don't know for sure what the expectation is. Be consistent with the reinforcement. I will tell you, we've got great reinforcement plans that are out there at our school sites, but I will tell you a lot of times that buy-in is by yard duties, maybe a campus supervisor here, the administrative team, maybe some teachers. Guys, kids should be reinforced for what it is that they're doing when they're following school rules. And I'll give you an example. You could say, well, geez, Mark, what could I do with some of my tougher kids? Should they be giving reinforcement? Honestly, guys, we look for them. We almost catch them being good, and we give them more reinforcement to try to shift the behavior. So, tier 2, tier 3 kids, those kids that aren't responding well, or at least haven't, sometimes you need to up the reinforcement when you see the appropriate behavior to try to shape the behavior the other way. It's oftentimes not exactly what happens in the classroom, unfortunately, but it should. Work with the school community to set your behavior goals. And again, this kind of drives that action plan I talked about when we talked about tier one. When we all buy in, when we all collectively as a school say, hey, we're going to address bullying, or hey, like I've used the example, we're going to address littering, or hey, we're going to address horseplay at recess, or whatever it is, and we all buy into it, and the kids know we're all watching for it, teaching what it looks like to do it right, and also reinforcing when we see it done right, guys, again, it will shift behavior, I promise. Couple more. Realize that all behavior takes time, and this is a tremendous challenge for administrators, teachers, how myself, or heck, myself. There is no doubt it's a challenge, and what I mean by that is what you do when you begin working with a kid who struggles behaviorally is you basically you realize that obviously they're struggling behaviorally, so they've been a pain in your classroom, or maybe a pain when you're supervising them out on the yard or whatever it may be. But when you implement something, or you're implementing an intervention, no intervention is going to be an immediate stopgap for it. Behavior takes time to change. And behavior takes time to change by reinforcing it when you see it on a positive end, but also recognizing it. And again, this is an incredibly challenging, but let's say, for example, that teacher who's got a kid that yells out 10 times in an hour, and you've taken some data on it, informal even, and you know what's happening. Guys, 3 weeks later, if he's blurting out and it's 5 times, it's an improvement on the behavior. And it's important to keep that in mind. Understand that suspension should be that method of last resort. Guys, PBIS isn't what's driving suspension down. Our legislation, there's K8, there's a no home suspension for willful defiance. Also, suspension rates are now plastered on the California dashboard with a mindset that we will continue to improve on a year-to-year basis. So I would embrace PBIS as a tool to use to help reach those goals. Understand that PBIS will not cure all the tier 3 kids. I kind of talked about that. You're still going to have those kids in your classroom. And again, while they get their intervention, you look for ways to reinforce the positives when you see those improvements. This is somewhat repetitive, but student assistant specialists and clinicians aren't the only ones who can provide tier 2 supports. We've had counselors who are running social skill groups. We have had teachers who are paid to do check-in, check-out. We have had teachers who have been paid to do social skill groups after school. So please, guys, don't feel the limitation that everything has to be done by a student assistant specialist. There can be more help. If you're interested in that, I'd talk to your administrative team or your principal at your school site, or however that may work. And principals, I have some ideas also in terms of what you guys can do. I think misconception number 5. We have schools rules posted and we have weekly drawings. We are doing PBIS. No. Again, we do PBIS when the school community, or a large portion of them, are engaged in the teaching, reinforcing of school-wide rules and expectations. So just having a poster up on the wall and holding a weekly drawing, if I'm a teacher or a yard duty or a secretary who isn't reinforcing by passing out bucks when I see a good behavior, or reinforcing the rules, or letting kids know what the school rules are when they first come to school, you're not doing PBIS. As a matter of fact, you're doing something that probably has very, very little research base in terms of any success. Coming down the home stretch, PBIS and relationships. So what do relationships have to do with PBIS? Well, relationships, guys, are huge. And I often get asked this question, and I kind of want to clarify. They're interlinked, but they're separate. PBIS, when it's done right, builds culture at a school site. It builds a framework of at Fremont Elementary, we are safe, respectful, and responsible. At you name the school rules, we're this, and those are our core tenets that we believe in at whatever school, depending on whatever rules are developed. Even though culture helps shape relationships, positive and thoughtful interactions are what builds those relationships. And PBIS doesn't have that. They don't have like a cookie cutter, like, hey, approach your kids this way, or things to say, etc. And so I would tell you that along with, to be coupled with PBIS, strong relationships with kids, guys, is what you want to see behavior change. Do that. And again, I'll go back to my classroom management class days and the stuff that I would teach you if I had you in front of me. But It's funny when we talk about some of our kids that are the most challenging. They're usually the ones that don't have a relationship with any child at the school site, including the teacher. And teachers, I'll give you a break on this. It's natural. When if I've got 30 kids in front of me and I've got 5 who are misbehaving, the least ones that I want to develop a relationship with are those 5. But of those 5 guys, those are the ones who need it the most. They need me the most. So really, my challenge back to you guys as teachers, classified or administrators, take your most challenging kids and try to develop a relationship with them using a PBIS format, PBIS structure, but just genuine relationship building. You will see that 5 I talked about go down to 3 or go down to 2. And that's really what it's all about, guys. We're not going to fix them all, but relationships is key. John Hattie of teachers, you do any work on that. Relationships, you can get kids to do things that they would never ever think of, including academics. You believe in them, change their behavior, you're reinforcing them, they know you're looking out for them. Huge. My final PBIS misconception. I don't have time to teach behavior to students, or they already know what the school, or they should already know, I guess, what the school rules and expectations are. First off, as I kind of illustrated before, guys, teaching kids behavior can be done in about 2 seconds. Hey, here's an example of what it looks like to be safe in my class. Here's an example of what being unsafe looks like in my classroom. That would take roughly 35-40 seconds. You go back to anything that Harry Wong wrote. Hey, you spend the time front loading and continuing to reinforce your rules and expectations, procedures. Well, guess what? That behavior, or the time you spend on it pays dividends as you work throughout the school year in terms of less and less behavior. Also, kids, it doesn't matter if you're a junior and senior in high school. People don't know the expectations unless they're taught the expectations. Again, I would actually say it's harder junior high and high school, because where we get guilty is a certain teacher's expectations, they change going class to class or administrator to administrator. Kids don't know what the expectations until they're taught what those are. Okay, so don't assume that kids, regardless of their ability level, behavior level, etc., know what the expectations are. They need to continually be reinforced. They need to continually be taught. All right, that is one heck of a long. Oh, I'm at 31 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap this thing up with this. First off, thank you for taking the time. This is unusual for me. I have never. It's awkward for me because I usually try to do a really good job of being engaging and a lot of group talk when I do my trainings, etc. But in this case, it was a lot of me talking, and I probably still have a lot more to say, but I don't want to bore you guys anymore. So the last thing is your practicum. So, and I'm not sure, I have not worked this out, but I would assume it's either attached to this or I'm going to send this to you. But there's really 2 things beyond this 30 minutes. You now got about an hour and a half on your own. I've provided an article I want you to read. I want you to make sure your name's on the paper. And I want you to type me up on a 1-page, double space, 12-point font response to it. What you took away from it, what you liked about it, what you disagreed with, etc. That's all I want you to do. I'm not going to be putting it up on a rubric. I'm not going to be sharing it with anybody. Don't feel intimidated by this. Just want to know what you're thinking. If you run out of something, then just tell me what you thought about the training, if there was any eye-openers for you. That should probably take you, I'm guessing, around 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more. What I want you to do for the remainder of the time is I want you to visit pbis.org and just surf around that website. Very cool website. Got a lot of information about where PBIS is established, PBIS schools, trainings, but it also has a lot of other articles that I almost grabbed some from. PBIS during a pandemic, what it's going to look like when kids come back. A lot of resources that are out there. So at the very bottom, or I guess if you wanted to turn it over or give it a second sheet, either way, I just want to know 2 resources that you found beneficial and why. And it doesn't have to be, it could be, I found the article on COVID-19 to be beneficial because, 1 to 2 sentences on each, something simple. You guys do that and you send it back to me at my email address. You will have earned 2 hours toward your 0.5. Finally, if you're still looking for other hours, I would contact our Curriculum and Instruction Professional Development Office. They are busy putting things up there. I want to speak highly of Amber Barnwell, behavioral coach for Modesto City Schools. She just is getting ready to, or by the time, if anybody listens to this, we'll have put up trauma-informed practices. And she's got kind of a similar type format, probably about a half hour, 40 minutes of talk, and then a little bit of a practicum exercise. But trauma-informed, guys, is a important way of understanding, or an eye-opener in terms of understanding our kids, what they go through, and how to best approach them. So definitely very, very beneficial in terms of how to work with at-risk kids. With that, good luck on the practicum. Email me if you have any questions. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me share something that I truly do love, and that's positive behavior intervention and support. Bye-bye.